In this video, I'll pit my player scale Venator against an enemy warship in an epic space battle. You see, I specialize in building Star Wars megaships in Minecraft with immaculate detail. Previously, I focused on giant Republic ships, but that leaves a slight problem. They're lonely, like me, so they need worthy opponents to do battle with. Introducing the CIS. These are the bad guys from the Republic's perspective, but really they're just fighting for independence. For context, the Republic have more triangular megaships, precursors to the Imperial Star Destroyer, while Separatist ships are a lot more organic shaped, full of curved hulls that will make building a challenge. For example, the Munificent-class Star Frigate, measuring 825 by 426 by 243 meters. My first step was to transfer these lengths into Minecraft at a scale of 1 block to 1 meter, and then to lay out the main components. The typical method I used for curve shapes didn't work out because of how intense these intersecting curves are, so I turned to the modeling tool in the Axiom mod. By connecting points with the aptly named convex hull mode, I could quickly build up a base shape for the forward hull. However, this shape wasn't perfect and still required a lot of smoothing by hand. I'll admit that these fancy tools are very powerful, but to make it perfect, you can't fully rely on the commands. I repeated the same process of modeling with Axiom and smoothing iteratively for the rear hull, before positioning placeholder shapes for the main thrusters and the sloping fins. We've made some excellent progress, and I would say the ship is already recognizable. But how am I getting the measurements for each component? Let me explain. I'm using this model by Kozik as a 3D reference. You can take screenshots of different perspectives, which you can then measure digitally in pixels or physically in centimeters. Or inches if you're insane, I mean American. Since we know the Munificent is 825 meters long, we can calculate any other length. Say the image of my ship is 31.2 centimeters long, and I measure the aft hull at 11.3 centimeters. I take the ratio of those lengths and multiply it by the known scale, and I get 298.8 whatever meters, so I know my hull should be roughly 300 blocks long. Following this principle, I swiftly shaped the repeating units that made up the ship's super dense reactant tanks. It was more of a challenge to lay out the 5 docking ports because they overlap slightly. I was quite worried that it wouldn't line up, but I just minorly fudged the measurements to make it work. Don't tell anyone. Next, I designed this fairing section on the ventral side, which means the belly of the ship, or the underside, and dorsal is the opposite for that terminology. Then I shaped the forward ventral hull, adding turret positions that made lining up the components above much easier. These frigates were initially used by the Intergalactic Banking Clan, one of the Republic's most powerful and influential commerce guilds, to guard their physical assets and private financial communications network, as well as to spook any planets facing heavy debts. They were equipped with 26 twin turbolaser cannons, mounted above and below, so I needed a design that could be mirrored upwards. My first attempt looked a little too much like a bird, but I think that I fixed that issue by elongating the design. It was motivating to see the ship come together so quickly, especially the proper details like the intimidating line of turrets, but there was still a ways to go. Next up were the wings, and it was yet another moment when I was very glad to have measured everything out beforehand. Since the ship had a width of 426 meters, but I'm using an odd-numbered center, of course, I built with wall blocks at the very edges to be as accurate as possible. Back towards the bow, I started work on the dual super heavy turbolaser cannons, which were attached to a massive elevation mount mechanism. They were slow to maneuver, but deadly to larger warships. This was a great example of the level of detail I wanted to achieve across the whole ship. I was honestly putting off the aft ventral hull because I thought that it was another organic shape, but it was actually just a couple of uniform curves that tapered off at the stern, making it relatively simple to implement the base shape. It's been amazing to see people on my Discord server feeling inspired by my videos to take on their own mega projects. One piece of advice that has helped me tremendously is breaking down a massive project into manageable parts. I divided up the ship into several components, and each component further into shaping and detailing. In this way, I could break down the huge task into tiny steps and motivate myself at the same time by checking off each step along the way. Next, I tackled these mini wings, which the model maker called the vanes, defined as a broad flat projecting surface designed to guide the motion of an object. but honestly, I have no idea what their purpose is apart from looking cool. I had a problem where it was difficult to view the components below the main hull. Luckily, the model I was referencing had files for individual parts, since it was designed for 3D printing, making it easier to design the ship's spine, vane connectors, and hull supports. I continued the spine towards the bow, before designing the dual long-range ion cannons, which sit below the bridge. Ion weaponry is formidable in the Star Wars universe, because the blasts overload and disable energy systems, essentially turning enemy ships off. Another important element protected by the hull were the main reactors. Their base shape was simple, but problematically they were significantly angled. Ignoring the maths, I decided to eyeball the radius of its central circle, which obviously meant I got the first attempt wrong. I'm using the Axiom mod to rotate my selection freely, and to visualize if it will actually fit. You can use all of the fancy creative tools like World Edit and Axiom for free on our plot servers over at the bakery. After blocking in some color, I hand smoothed the gaps resulting from the transformation, before positioning the main reactors within the ship's exoskeleton. Next, I put together the main shapes along the ship's spine, leaving placeholders for antennae and aerials. Perhaps you were thinking that the ship didn't need any more guns, but I added several light turbo laser cannons to each side. For the bridge design, I relied on slabs so that I could have half-block centers between the floors. Slabs were also easy to manipulate on the diagonals. The bridge might look a bit unfamiliar because I'm following the live action design, rather than the bright yellow and green one from the Clone Wars show. With the bridge done, I had completed the shaping of the exterior, but most of the faces were blank. I had a lot of detailing to undertake, but honestly, that was exciting, not daunting. Before attempting those details, I wanted to have a stab at some interior spaces because yes, I'm going all in. We're doing a full interior. The bridge interior was a narrower space to work with than the references suggested, but I made the recognizable tiered shaping work, including lots of fancy green light details and consoles to match. I think the windows look good from the inside and outside too.
Captain, have you secured the system?
Yes, Admiral. And I've established a blockade at the exit to the main hyperspace route.
Nice work.
At the back of the room, I connected the bridge to turbolifts, utilizing the common water elevator technology, of course. A level below the bridge, I fleshed out a meeting room, complete with a large hologram table, lots of seating, and a couple more consoles. Midship, within the docking modules, I made a lobby design with highlights of path blocks and dark prismarine, inspired by images from the Clone Wars show. Then I had a go at recreating the main corridor using the same references. These fancy interior spaces reflect the banking clan's opulence, giving the ship some much needed character. After deciding on a palette for the exterior, I measured out 9 frame lines for the forward hull, raised them up with clever commands, and then smoothed them by hand. Around the start of the Clone Wars, the banking clan loaned fleets of Munificent-class frigates to the Confederacy. This is why they have the blue markings representing the CIS, as well as these darker stripes representing their banking clan origin. Interestingly, they actually profited from both sides of the war by providing massive loans to the Grand Army of the Republic as well. Positioning the CIS emblem was a fun challenge due to the sloping hull. As you can see, smearing it directly onto the hull wasn't going to work. So I stacked the design and then used Axiom to angle it in all 3 axes, before pasting it in and cleaning out by hand. I also had to make sure that the blue concrete powder had solid blocks below it so that it couldn't fall. This element from the spine was repeated ventrally, so I flipped my design and it fit perfectly on the underside, which was certainly promising for my measurement estimations. These seemingly random details are what I like to call greebles, and it's a technique inspired by model makers reusing waste plastic parts and making surfaces appear more technological. This is always my favorite part of a megaship build. It's just satisfying to fill in blank surfaces in this way. At the forward ventral hull, I added supports to the bow, as well as stripes to the underside. Flipping my non-avian turbolaser design, I positioned the remaining 16 turrets on the underside, before adding some extra depth, because we needed more guns. Expanding on my interior design, I detailed the exterior docking ports. Top tip, you can use iron bars and glass panes to imitate vertical slabs for your circles. Then I decorated the docking modules with a panel pattern using lots of andesite walls, which I think looks really cool from far away. It just gives it a kinda sci-fi vibe. Below that, I quickly added some small greebles, followed by some depth to the reactant tanks. Continuing my initial greebling, I filled in the remaining empty space. I used the 3D model as inspiration, but it lacked color, so it was really important that I thought about how to use different textures to break up the shapes here. Another ventral component was this fairing, and I polished it off with some quick line work. Man, that was a lot of building, but it does look amazing to have some color on the ship now, and I'm seriously on a roll with this detailing work, so let's continue. At the base of the ship's spine, I designed some power cells, basically futuristic batteries for some of the ship's minor energy systems. Like I mentioned before, it was pretty difficult to understand what was going on below this hull. Even with the individual files, trying to visualize how everything fit together was a bit of a nightmare. First, I added large radiators to dissipate heat from the reactors, using polished granite and deep slate to match the colors from the official cross-section. Then I connected the other side of the radiator to the dorsal hull and added a little detail to the back of the reactors to convey how a water cooling loop could work. To spruce up the blank surfaces of the platform, I did some more greebling work, before building some long supports to hold up the bow. These supports also acted as inertial compensators, nullifying the massive g-forces involved with space travel. Honestly, this section can look quite messy due to the intricacy, but when you find the right angles, it looks awesome. I particularly like the complementary colors between the radiators and the hull markings. Back at the vanes, I still had no idea what their purpose was. Definitely not aerodynamic. Perhaps they were radiators too. Nevertheless, I made them not sad with a quick detail job, and the same to the surrounding flat surfaces. Between the wings sat a bunch of communications equipment, and I left placeholders for building the aerials later. Within the wings, I had helpfully left my initial measurements, so I brought them to the top and used them to guide the detailing. That's one of the only times I've respected my past self. After adding a blue stripe across the front, I did a quick pass over the remaining space and broke it up with various rectangular shapes. In the wing trench, I designed cannons, sensors, and aerials. These cannons would just shoot into their own hull, which is not ideal, so I tried to make it look like they could be angled up and down. I also filled in the back section before flipping the entire wing design to the underside, replacing the concrete powder with lapis blocks so that the stripe didn't fall into the endless void. Wow, with the wings complete, the ship is looking incredible. That's everything done up to this point. Well, apart from the interior spaces. Let's dive back into that. From the main corridor, I designed some more elevators to move between floors. Taking inspiration from the Clone Wars show, I recreated the brig where Ahsoka is held captive by Cad Bane, and Anakin comes to the rescue. Perhaps you could lock your friends in here.
Is this what you called me down here for? You just wanted to like put me in a prison cell, see what happens? Like this is
don't be ridiculous.
Really I'm stuck in here.
On the same floor, I designed the dim, eerie corridor and the spooky interrogation room where this poor fella got zapped to death. Perhaps you could zap your friends to death in here. In-game. This dorsal fin housed the ship's hyperdrive units. The Munificent had a Class 1 primary hyperdrive, the same as the Venator, meaning they had the same hyperspace base travel time. A ship like the Millennium Falcon with a Class 0.5 hyperdrive could travel twice as fast. The front of the fin was decorated with sensory antennae and point defense guns. Yep, more guns. The most challenging aspect of this component was adding consistent depth to the fin's angled faces, but that wasn't really a problem compared to what I had faced already. The ship had 7 ion drive thrusters, 3 main and 4 auxiliary. To design the main thrusters, I returned to my tried and tested method. First, measure out the reference in sections. Then, stack cylinders based on those measurements. Next, fill in the shape and rotate it, before blocking in the textures and detailing to your heart's content. For the engines, I went with shroom lights for an orangey yellow glow. Upon pasting them in, I realized that I needed to first redefine the edges of the aft dorsal hull in order to be true to the reference. After that adjustment, I correctly positioned the 3 main thrusters, connecting the central one to the dorsal fin. To spice up the bland hull, I went through exactly the same process as before, so I won't linger here. These side hulls weren't actually connected to anything else, so I implemented a series of ribs before adding further greebling to their flat inner walls. It's so awesome to be able to see markings along the whole ship. We're super close to finishing now, and it's all coming together. For the auxiliary ion drive thrusters, I followed my habitual method, so we'll speedrun that too. With all of the engines positioned, this view of the stern became one of my favourite parts of the ship. Then I renovated the final ventral component, adding a bunch of irregular indents to the curving hull to break up the shaping, mostly by hand. Within the side hulls, I followed my headcanon and designed some hangars for my CIS Vulture Droid design. I know that there's probably a more space-efficient way to store these guys, but I was kind of inspired by the automated Vulture Droid deployment station to keep them upright and held from above. I thought it was a pretty neat idea to use water for the entrance because it looks like a shield, but you can still pass through it. On the wingtips, I added long-range hyperwave transceiver masts, capable of establishing live communications links anywhere in the galaxy. The Munificent-class originally needed its vast communications array for the banking clan's secure financial network, but the Confederacy took advantage of the equipment during wartime to broadcast anti-Republic propaganda, jam enemy frequencies, and communicate with battle droids. And the exterior is finished, is what a perfectionist would not say. First I had to go over all of the hull markings, mimicking weathering using lapis ore, diorite, and polished tuff for their respective colours. Okay, now, the bow needs to be completely retouched because the ion cannons could look a little more menacing and these flat shapes did not look good from below. Last thing, I'll add bright buttons to the bridge to emulate lit up windows. Nice. Okay, now the exterior is done. I promise, look, the cool bar is moving. And it looks outstanding. Before finishing the interior, I needed a Munificent-class transport shuttle for the main hangar. I think that this time-lapse is really interesting because it illustrates my process for designing smaller vehicles. It's just cool to see how my design decisions evolve during the build. I decided to position the hangar here, above the turrets. Again, I looked at stills from the Clone Wars show to inspire the room. I think that this is actually the first time I've used Skulk in a build. The animated texture is perfect for sci-fi backlighting. With the walls and ceiling decorated, I plopped in 2 of my shuttles, before detailing the ground with box assets, which the clones used as cover while fighting for the Munificent. Since the Munificent was almost entirely automated, I thought that it would be neat to include a central droid brain. And I used this scene from the Skeleton Crew show as a reference, because I think that guy is friend-shaped. However, the frigate did have a nominal crew of around 200, who saw to the vessel's maintenance and daily operations. Therefore, I put together a hallway with enough barracks and suites to reach that capacity. If you would like to go exploring in the Munificent, you can find the download on my Patreon, alongside my expansive vehicle collection. I am evidently severely unemployed, so the over 100 members over there allow me to do this as a job. I manually typed out all of these names and I truly appreciate the support. Thank you. Whoa, what was that? Oh my gosh, what a coincidence, my 1:1 scale Venator design, also complete with a full interior, just dropped in out of hyperspace, check it out. Before I could begin the inevitable battle scene, I wanted to design a couple extra starfighters. For the Republic side, the Eta II Light Interceptor, the starfighter used by the Jedi during the Clone Wars. This little scene is a nod to Episode 3. Opposing them, the Droid Tri-Fighter, an absolutely deadly dogfighter, with a unique shape that was incredibly difficult to replicate in Minecraft at player scale. Towards the Munificent stern, I deployed a squadron of Republic Y-Wings, firing ion torpedoes at the thrusters and hyperdrives in an attempt to neutralize the frigate. To imitate the impact explosions and ion blasts, I used enough glass to make Bismuth proud. Then I set up standoffs and dogfights between various Republic fighters, with droid ships giving chase to the Jedi starfighters and Republic headhunters. The megaships themselves have already begun firing from their turbolaser turrets, and we're beginning to see some exploding casualties from the dogfighting. Yep, I think this scene speaks for itself. Let me know what you want to see next in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more, because my upload frequency is, thanks for watching.